How does a banana trigger a CIA-backed coup? Do AirPods herald the arrival of a new global order? What do LED lights say about the future of humanity? I'm Ed Conway, and in each episode of my new podcast, Stuff Matters, I take an object, crack it open, and reveal the world-shaping forces hidden inside. This is economics told through the things we think we understand. Search Stuff Matters on your podcast app to listen and follow.
Hello, good morning and welcome. It's Monday, July the 20th. Andy Burnham becomes the 59th Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, Labour's 8th in office and the first Catholic holder of the post. He succeeds Keir Starmer, the 16th shortest holder of the post, with a promise, Andy Burnham that is, of his own 10-year plan for the future. Another one. My name is Anne McElvoy from Politico.
And I'm Sam Coates of Sky News. Keir Starmer intoned that politics would tread more lightly on our lives after a decade of Tory turmoil, yet here we are again. Today, Andy Burnham will say that he is acutely conscious of being the sixth person to walk up Downing Street in just 10 years, the seventh since 2016. It's been quite the journey to get here, however. Let's just listen to how he managed the bloodless coup that culminates today.
And I do hereby declare that Andy Burnham is duly elected. Thank you.
Everyone knows that politics isn't working. Tonight just could, be the turning point.
This could be the reason why Andy Burnham finds his path to number 10 is easier than some predicted.
That it's not today that the herd is moving. They are stampeding.
This is uniquely Trumpian, isn't it? But even by his standards, to pre-announce the apparent resignation of the leader of another country, a close ally, is utterly remarkable.
Because it feels like here in Westminster things are building. You never want to use the word inevitable in politics, but there does feel to be a sense of inevitability.
The question my party is asking now is whether I am best placed to lead us into the next general election. That is why I will resign as leader of the Labour Party.
We need to ask why he set out this timetable. What are we waiting for? There are critical decisions that need to be made.
We now come to Andy Burnham, member for Makerfield.
I am going to break with the more of the same approach that has got us here.
I stick by the manifesto and the promises that it made, so let me be absolutely clear about that.
It is therefore my honour to declare that the duly elected leader of the Labour Party is Andy Burnham.
I will be a leader for the North, the South, the East and the West. And I know what I want to do, working with you all. I have a plan.
Thank you to our producer Evan Hall for that great montage. Andy Burnham promises revolution in many ways, but he starts with an establishment appointment. He goes to see the King at lunchtime, which means he arrives as a mere MP and leaves as Prime Minister of a country where the Church of England is still the official faith. In a very telling interview with Patrick Maguire at the Times this morning, he says that he's not a regular mass goer, Andy Burnham, but he does still profess the Catholic faith. And he says his mother will be wearing out her rosary beads this morning. From now on, though, it's the political theology of Andy Burnham that will be our daily bread.
It is quite a remarkable moment to have the first Catholic Prime Minister, and we've had to wait until 2026 for that. Like Keir Starmer, this week he'll tell us that he has a 10-year plan for the country. Keir Starmer's 10-year plan lasted 2 years and 15 days. Unlike Keir Starmer, he'll say up front that he's not predicting his longevity, more setting out the level of his ambition. He told The Times, "I'm not saying that means I'm setting out to say I'm going to be here for 10 years. It's more that we're not in the right place structurally. We're not in the right place as a country. I think people can feel that."
One thing he has in common with Keir Starmer, Sam, is that Andy Burnham is saying that he hopes that he can get politics to calm down after this very turbulent last decade. And he has, I think, a slight finger wag to his political contemporaries here. He says, you can't just get swept up in moments and emotions and impulses, the fleeting things and the drifts of social media. After the bromides towards Labour of the last fortnight, also some criticism, I think, about those who put ambition over vision. He says, I won't name names, but I have seen people in Parliament, Westminster, they get something because they want to do something. They want to be an office holder, and that's it. Who could that be? Anyway, Andy Burnham names his own choices in Cabinet this afternoon. It's been a pretty closely guarded lineup. Will that formation be able to turn his hopes and intentions into clearer policy and delivery and defeat the curse of Keir?
Right. Yeah, no, that's one of the big questions. There's another potential big symbolic change doing the round. Reports from Chris Mason of the BBC. He could just dispense with the lectern outside number 10 altogether, which would be a big break from the past. Do you want to just run us through the sequence of the day?
Say what? It's the lectern bit that's worrying me. What's going to happen to Tobias Goff, otherwise known as the hot podium guy, who brings out the lectern and the audio equipment? I mean, I thought his role was near constitutional. Anyway, one way or the other, Playbook has the timings for today, and Starmer's due to speak at around 11. He'll use his last moments as Prime Minister to make the case that he's leaving the country in a better state than he found it. That appears to be the leaving mantra of the last Prime Minister. Andy Burnham has been staying nearby in a Grace and Favour Whitehall apartment. So he will head to meet with King Charles at around noon, will accept the appointment as Prime Minister, then driven back to number 10 to speak in front of that black door between 12:30 and 1 p.m. And the Cabinet then starts being announced just an hour later. We do get on with these things in Britain at quite a pace.
Yeah, but we are really on the edge of our seats for that cabinet moment, because he has managed, to his credit, to keep the names that he's going to announce in a black box, as he put it to the Times, for several days now. He insisted on Friday he hadn't even decided. I didn't quite believe that. People asking and wanting to know whether they had jobs were being told by his team that he'd made no final decisions by Thursday. Now, the conventional wisdom is that Shabana Mahmood is heading for the Treasury and maybe Ed Miliband for the Foreign Office, and Johnny Reynolds, who was moved to Chief Whip, back to the Business Department, but probably sort of beefed up, folding in some of the bits of an abolished Science and Technology Department. But really, there's not much certain. And even though the weekend cabinet ministers that I was in contact with had no idea of their fate.
A couple of things appear to have shifted. As you mentioned there, I think Johnny Reynolds was greatly relieved to be out of the Whip's office and back into a big department. Felt like he was a bit sidelined towards the end there by Keir Starmer, so that would be quite a win for him. Barring a big surprise, the talk of David Miliband returning as Foreign Secretary has morphed into Brother Ed being speculated on for the role. We really do not know for sure, except I do hear that Yvette Cooper cleared her official diary at the end of last week, so it sounded like she was maybe conceding that a move was coming there. There's also John Healey to keep an eye on. He has a lot of support for a return to some senior role, having resigned, of course, over the defence investment plan and the failure to get that over the line. And unless we get something of a D-mill-shaped surprise, something that became clearer, I think, as this process went along, is that who goes out of jobs also shapes decisions for an incoming Prime Minister. So if you bring in someone from the outside, as that example was, and I gather that there were serious talks about that, you do have a problem, Sam, because you're not actually solving a problem in terms of the Connect 4, Connect 28 or whatever we're on now, cabinet. You've actually created another problem because you've got the factions to appease. You've got some big beasts you prefer inside the tent rather than out. You want to offer them something, but they may not accept it. If we remember going back to the Tories, Jeremy Hunt didn't accept a move to Defence Secretary, so that knocked out a whole lot of planning for that cabinet. Is that possible that something like that will happen today? Then you've got those candidates like Wes Streeting, clearly hoping for some reward for backing Andy Burnham, quickly having pledged a contest. But yet, how seriously do you take that? And the hard truth for all of the hopefuls, barring maybe one or two nailed-on people, is that he can do what he likes. This is the moment of maximum freedom of manoeuvre for a new Prime Minister.
It all gets harder after now. When it comes to the cabinet appointments, I was very struck because I was in the room on Friday when he accepted the crown of the Labour Party. And he said then that he would end factionalism in the Labour Party. Right. Now, I suppose the first instinct of quite a lot of people slightly to snigger at something like that, particularly given that at that point there was quite a lot of briefing against Shabana Mahmood for Chancellor, including in the room. But if you just take actually what Andy Burnham said at face value for a moment, I'd argue that if you're going to end factionalism, you actually can only do so by understanding it and addressing it rather than simply pretending it's not there. And here is my big test for Andy Burnham when it comes to his cabinet appointments, which is basically how many of his own does he choose to appoint? So does his cabinet suddenly look like it's overrepresented by the Burnham gang, some of which are the Greater Manchester group of MPs? So that would be Angela Rayner, Lisa Nandy, Johnny Reynolds, Lucy Powell. So plus Burnham himself, that's 5 out of the 25 slots to one geographical, ideological, more or less, wing. Plus, you've got his friends, so that's Ed Miliband, we still think they're friends, and Louise Haigh. And then there are lesser-known Manchester names of people close to Burnham, like Jim McMahon, who's been out and about batting for him, and Christian Wakeford, the whip, who lent Burnham his office during this transition period. So I am interested in how many of his gang get in, or whether they think that they need to kind of conspicuously show that just because you're part of Andy's gang, you don't automatically get a big place at the top of government. Because part of the challenge about Andy's gang is so many of them suffered at the hands of Keir Starmer. You know, Angela Rayner was sacked, Lucy Powell was sacked, Johnny Reynolds was moved against his will. Miliband had to fight to stay in his job and stop himself being moved in one of the reshuffles. So making sure, A, that it isn't factional, and B, it isn't just an anti-Keir Starmer dominated cabinet, I think is an upfront challenge.
Really interesting. And what those changes mean, we love watching the personnel changes and the names on the red boxes. But what does it mean for our first glimpses of policy as well, Sam? How does he line up those names so that they actually mean something in terms of what he wants to get on with, as well as just satisfying personal ambitions? And as you suggest, making that balance between potential factions that could undermine his leadership. So in terms of policy, well, the only confirmed announcement so far is that he's scrapping that digital ID scheme of Starmer's, announced not even a year ago at party conference. And he is reprioritising resources, he says, from that. It's a bit mysterious what those resources actually are and what you get back from that. Anyway, there is also a plan I've been looking into to put Thames Water into administration as part of a much bigger overhaul of water companies. More on that in just a second. There are signs also that he wants to allow more drilling in the North Sea, in the jackdaw oil and gas fields, though he won't break the 2024 manifesto promises of new licenses. Andrew MacDonald at the Playbook pointing out how that is to happen and how he balances that out, that jackdaw and Rosebank gas and oil fields waiting for government approval, both of them amid a very complex judicial process, but government does have a steering role here. The FT also saying it could mean further drilling next to the existing fields. Well, Donald Trump got ahead on this one and said that the people of Aberdeen were dancing in the streets at the prospect, which is quite a thought to conjure with.
And the list goes on and on. Energy charges, moving from energy bills onto general taxation, something on hospitality on pubs. Thing is, Anne, all of these things that are going to be announced in the next few days appear to have been drawn up before he identified and spoke to his Chancellor. Now, Andy Burnham himself has actually been spending some time in the Treasury, including yesterday, and his aide, Danny Coyne, has been working with the Treasury as well in and out of Horse Guards Parade. But it'll come perhaps as a bit of a shock to the new Chancellor to come in and find that Andy's been already spending her, or maybe his, money. On a serious note, Burnham will have been warned that he can't unnerve the markets by creating a big black hole by spending lots of money in week one. So that's why on Saturday night, his first announcement was about diverting resources from the digital ID program to his own priorities. But here's the thing. I've been told that people currently in government, for the next few hours at least, believe that the digital ID plan as it was, already denuded, was unfunded. Yes, in theory, it costs billions, and that's the number that was in the low billions was in the Office of Budget Responsibility document. But it didn't get cash either in the last spending review or in the last budget. So, in effect, Andy Burnham has been announcing that he reprioritised pretty much nothing. And I think that may be why they said that he was reprioritising resources rather than actually using the word money. And certainly Lucy Powell couldn't put a figure on it yesterday, which I thought was quite telling. The same will happen if they try and find savings from the Chagos deal. Should they go there, they'll only find that the money for that in the first year went into the defence investment plan. So that would be an unfunded pot as well if they tried to divert it. The big problem that Andy Burnham's got, particularly for the announcement this week, is that the government has just gone through a massive exercise of trying to sort of squeeze out all the last pots for as much for as much money as possible for the defence investment plan that we got at the start of the month. And there are mini black holes already all over Whitehall where departments have been asked for capital savings and haven't yet thrown them up. So there are unknown black holes as well. So you're already starting behind before these announcements this week. And that's before you get to big things like Thames Water Administration, which have huge costs associated quite quickly. You've been looking into that?
I have. I thought that's absolutely fascinating. Sort of the idea of the unknown black holes, as well as the ones that we know exist. And it's a recurring question here, isn't it? When you've been through this kind of scoping and pressing, trying to get money out of the system to put into different areas, what is real money and real savings, and what is a little bit of kind of fantasy money? Now, one of the areas where I think this is going to play a role is a big move that the government seems keen to make. I think Burnham is personally very invested in this, which is forcing underperforming water companies into public ownership and creating incentives really for a much more sweeping overhaul of the water industry. So I understand that policy work is advancing very fast to come up with not just one model, but different models for that, for different kinds of water company, remembering that some of them are effectively leveraged through private equity, a lot of the underperformers, and others are listed on the stock exchange and they're in slightly different positions. My question, I had a quick look at this yesterday, is whether it really answers the question of the infrastructure upgrade and how to fund it in the way that the government will ultimately be judged on, because ultimately bills do need to rise to pay for the cleaner rivers, the beaches, to address the dreadful sewage spills, to create new reservoirs, around 9 are thought to be needed, etc., and generally upgrade a pretty awful infrastructure. That's 20 billion, probably more, over 5 years. Now, in Burnham's way of thinking about this, public ownership brings more accountability than those evasive CEOs at water companies. You can control their pay, you can avoid them and their teams getting big bonuses while the services are not adequate. And Thames Water is obviously, if you like, the negative poster child for this, because there you can really say that there is a big problem to resolve. It is so heavily leveraged, it cannot really, it's going back to its creditors to say that it needs more money to deliver on its commitments under the water regulator. But here's the thing, the government's own water industry reviewer, Sir John Cunliffe, said in a report last year, we didn't think the problems the sector was facing could only be laid at the door of privatisation and profit. Better not tell the Labour Party that, but that's what he said. We pushed very hard, he continued, for evidence to show that other ownership structures were systematically better, and we didn't have results that showed that any one system was better than any other. So it'll be interesting, once this works its way through, whether that idea for a big sort of push for mutualisation, that's one model under discussion, and other ways of doing public ownership, do they really pass that test of would they automatically deliver a better service for the consumer, and how that argument will play out inside and outside Labour?
I feel fairly relaxed. That's what Andy Burnham said in an interview yesterday to all of the different challenges that you and I have outlined this morning. Let's see whether he looks like that when he appears around about midday. Let's see whether he still feels like that at the end of his big bang first 2 weeks. We'll be there every single step of the way. We're doing Politics at Sam and Anne's Monday to Thursday this week, Monday to Thursday next week. And then, unlike Andy Burnham, we get to crawl under a rock. He'll have to keep going with his summer tour. So I'm delighted to say, see you tomorrow morning, Tuesday morning, for the next episode. See you then, Anne.
How soon is now, Sam? How soon is now?
How does a banana trigger a CIA-backed coup? Do AirPods herald the arrival of a new global order? What do LED lights say about the future of humanity? I'm Ed Conway, and in each episode of my new podcast, Stuff Matters, I take an object, crack it open, and reveal the world-shaping forces hidden inside. This is economics told through the things we think we understand. Search Stuff Matters on your podcast app to listen and follow.